Welcome back to Singly Loving. I'm Kate, and this is my YouTube channel about being a single foster parent. So if you're a foster parent, a single foster parent, or maybe you know someone who's a foster parent, I hope you're encouraged by what you learn here on this channel. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about how I prepared to become a single foster parent. So I have a list of things on my computer, so you might see me glancing back and forth a little bit in this video. Just a number of things that I did in the about 8 or 9 months it took to become a single foster parent. And then even a little bit of the months leading up to actually getting licensed as a single foster parent. So the first thing that I definitely did, and I would recommend, is prayer. I remember so many moments of being in this communication back and forth with God about, God, why does it break my heart when I read this news article about a foster child? Or why does it break my heart when I watch this YouTube video about foster care or adoption? And just having a communication with God about what those emotions in me are trying to tell me. What is God trying to tell me through the way that I would be reacting to some of the things I would read or see or experience, even in real life with my friends who are foster parents. And I started to realize through this process of praying and just communicating with God that He had really broken my heart for kids that come from hard places. And He started to show me different things from my own background even, which I'll probably share at some point later, just how foster care has played a role in my life growing up and has played a role in the friendships that I have and the mentors that I have and things like that. And so I just started to talk to God more about those experiences, those things in my life. What was He teaching me through them? And how was I not going to waste the passions and the gifts and the things that He gave me, and also to be obedient to the things that He was talking to me about. So that's kind of a little bit of the overview of like how prayer played a part in becoming and preparing to become a single foster parent. So the next thing was that I have been in the process for about 5 years now, I'd say, of really getting a grasp on what it means to be single as a Christian. And several years ago, I started to make yearly lists of goals that I would have for the year at the beginning of the year. And I wanted to make goals that weren't just like bucket list kind of things, but they were, what am I going to do this year to maximize the position I'm in this year, the resources I have this year, the passions, the gifts I have this year. How am I really going to make the most of this year, writing it down as goals so that I don't just go through a year and realize, what did I even do this year? So I started to make these lists, and in these lists, I would have these goals that had to do with kids or caring for people well and things like that. And really what I think these lists ended up doing, it wasn't about the lists, essentially. It was about God preparing my heart to really be intentional about how I was going to use what I have and how to steward my singleness well. And that is something I can stand here today and just say I've learned about so much in the last 5 years. I'm so thankful for the different books I've read, podcasts I've listened to, radio programs I've listened to, people that have been in my life who've walked a life of singleness and really encouraged me. And I can stand here today and say, like, singleness is such a gift. If that is one thing I want to say to other single foster parents, is that you have a gift that you can use to make a huge difference in people's lives. You will make a difference in the lives of your friends, in the lives of the kids, of course, that are in your home, in the lives of their parents, the social workers. You have such a gift in your singleness to be a blessing to a number of people in your life. And it's not to say that there are not other blessings to being married and being a foster parent. But as a single, you have some unique gifts that a married foster parent doesn't have, like that ability to just pour out everything and to kind of lay down everything to be a great foster parent. for married foster parents, where it's different in that regard is that their marriage and to some degree their biological kids are very much a priority, and they ought to be. That's wonderful and that's beautiful, and God gave them families and a family to steward, but you have your singleness to steward, and I want to encourage you, how are you going to steward that well? So anyways, back to where I was at with this process, just really thinking, God, what do you want me to do with my singleness? I have a lot of options, and I did a lot of things that I could do. I bought a house. I have a job that I love. I have hobbies that I like to do. I stayed in really good shape. I learned to bake things and cook things and spent a lot of time with friends, and those are all good ways to steward my time. But over the past 5 years, it's been a process of God showing me, where does he want me to spend my time for his purposes and his kingdom? And so I've started to do that and really understand that I think foster parenting for me is aligning my heart with God's heart in this area and being obedient to taking care of his creation, loving people well, loving my neighbor. And this is just a fantastic way to do that. So I'm so glad I'm doing it. So another way, along sort of these same lines that I've prepared to become a foster parent, is I really needed to get a good grip and a good handle on my worldview. And how did foster parenting line up with my worldview? And as a Christian, it lines up really, really well, but it still took me a while really to pray about it and contemplate about how foster care is very much at the heart of God and loving people. And it is, of course, a system that has been set up by the state and the country and things like that. But it has a beautiful purpose and a heart behind it that as a Christian, I can totally get behind. And I needed to have reasons for doing it that were deeper than just, oh, it's a good thing. And it is a good thing, and that's great. But for me, my worldview is that God is the creator of all. He is the redeemer of all, the savior of all, and he wants to restore all things. And I think it breaks his heart to see kids that have been hurt or mistreated or neglected or can't get the care that he so desires for them from a parent figure that's in their life. And so for me, I needed to have a worldview behind doing foster care that was going to outlast the really hard things that were going to happen in foster care. In addition to that, I needed to think about the fact that God designed kids to be in families with a mom and a dad, and I was not going to be able to provide that as a single, and really think about how my worldview gave a platform for me to do this as a single. And I thought deeply about the ways that God used single people in the Bible, like Jesus, of course, used Jesus in huge ways, but many other biblical figures that we look up to, most of them, to be honest, were single people. And that encourages me so much that as a single, I just have a great opportunity to really have a ministry that will have a lasting impact that does not require me to first be married. And just ethically thinking about how God adopted all of us. God placed us in a family that he calls his church. And for me to bring a child into my home and care for them is not outside of the biblical standard that he's put into place for caring for people. Really, if anything, it's more about, sorry, there's a motorcycle going by. It's more about caring for my neighbor and loving them well and treating my neighbor how I would want to be treated. And treating the people, maybe you say the least of these, as I would want to be treated. And if one of my own neighbors had a need, I would want to step up and help. And in the same way, people down the road, a couple miles down the road, have a need, and their children have a need, and their families are hurting very much. And I want to treat them how I would want to be treated. And so there are lots of great biblical foundations that I can stand on to help myself continue along the path of foster care even when it gets hard. The next thing that I had to consider was my priorities in life, my finances, my support systems, my responsibilities. All of those current realities had to be considered when I thought about, is this something I can do? Because I had the worldview like that was set, but realistically, was I spending my money in a way that showed that this was going to be possible? Was I prioritizing things in my life that showed that I would be able to prioritize being a mom when I had a foster child? Were my responsibilities in my life at this time too great? Would I be needing to put aside important responsibilities if I did foster care? There are a lot of things to consider as a single, where I couldn't just quit my job, for example, as a single foster parent. There are certain financial realities to being single. I mean, I make all the money to support myself, in my job. And so I don't have a second income or something like that coming in. And I needed to think about my priorities as well. I don't have to prioritize foster care. It's not the only good thing in the world to do, but if it was going to be the thing that I was going to do, I needed to make sure that the other priorities in my life were consistent with making foster care a priority. So in that way, it was kind of like counting the costs. There are a lot of good things and a lot of things that are neither good nor bad that I did need to consider if I was willing to give them up, and then begin the process of giving some of those things up. For example, financially, I needed to make sure I had a really good budget. I heard over and over again that foster care doesn't pay. They don't pay. They give a reimbursement or a stipend for the care of the child and their needs. And it certainly covers, for me, it's covered so far vast majority of what the children have needed. But I need to be able to utilize daycare. And I needed to with one of my children so far, and what they provide through the state is definitely not enough for a normal daycare. And so my finances needed to be in order, and I needed to make some changes so that I would have a buffer and be able to pay the extra of childcare that wasn't provided by the state. So the next thing after counting the costs is learning the issues. So learning the issues in my community, because they're different than somewhere else in the United States. I live near Dayton, Ohio, which has gotten the reputation for being the epicenter of the opioid epidemic. Not a great reputation to have, but our community has been hurting for a long time, and I live a little bit outside of the city, but it's had the same effect on the community that I live in. And I chose to be a foster parent in the city of Dayton, or where in the community where Dayton is, the county where Dayton is. And so I knew that I needed to learn a lot about that crisis. And then in my learning about that crisis, and in learning about the foster care system more broadly, I learned that this epidemic is definitely hurting the foster care system, but it is not at all the only thing that is bringing kids into care. There's layers and layers and layers of issues, and heartaches and hurts and all sorts of things going on in communities that put them in a foster care crisis. So I had a lot of learning to do. I have become someone who watches the news, or really I read the news regularly, daily, a couple times a day, to learn about what's going on in the town where I am a foster parent. I watched a lot of YouTube documentaries, Netflix documentaries. I tried to learn as much as I could about issues related to foster care, not only drug epidemics, but also issues of poverty, issues of abuse, and like cycles of abuse in families. And so I'm still in this process of learning. I hope I never stop. But as I was preparing to be a foster parent, there was a lot of education that went into learning about my community, learning about issues, learning about myself, and just being a foster parent and the unique things about that. Along those lines, I just want to say too that the point of learning is to really grow my love and empathy and grow my heart and my compassion for the people involved and throughout the whole system. So, right, caseworkers, the city as a whole, the foster parents that are involved, the biological families that are involved, the bio parents that are involved, the children, of course, the school systems. There's so much I could say, like, but just to grow my heart for those things, learning is like vital to that. But right when we learn, it stirs our heart to love, and love, true love, promotes action. It leads to action, and so that's kind of the cycle that I hope happens through learning more about the issues. I mentioned this one a little bit before, but the next thing is just talking to people in my life. Older women who have become foster parents or have been foster parents before me, definitely talk to them about their experiences. I talk to people that are mentors in my life about what they think about me becoming a foster parent, maybe some of the challenges they think it would be for me, and how they think I can grow in preparation to becoming a foster parent. There's definitely, like, my employer I needed to talk to, my parents I needed to talk to, there's several people I needed to talk to. And I would balance that as well. This is a little bit of my personality, but absolutely there's people to talk to. But then balance probably with what I said earlier is just that I need to know that people's opinions ultimately aren't the thing that should drive me, but their recommendations and their advice were definitely something that I wanted to take in as I considered and got ready to become a foster parent. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to mention and talk about, it's kind of a big one. It's more of like a big picture look at how I prepared to become a single foster parent. Because to be honest, when I started this journey, I couldn't have imagined that I would be where I am now with it. So there's been a lot of, along the way, kind of riding this wave and seeing where the journey took me, seeing where God took me in this process, and being flexible and just kind of like being open-handed to what the process would bring. So when I first started the journey, I kind of had these like rigid ideas in my mind of what I was going to do. I was like, I think it was a little bit of even like rebellion against God and maybe what he was ultimately calling me to, but or maybe it was just these baby steps that I've taken along the way. So I kind of think of it as like riding a wave of where God was taking me. But at first, I was like, I want to become a foster parent because I want to be able to do respite for my friends who are foster parents. Wonderful. Like, yeah, I could have done that, and that's beautiful. I hope people do that. Like, one of the biggest burdens for foster parent is finding care for our kids, which I will talk about in a different video. But I really thought, that's what I'm going to do. I could become a respite caregiver, but I'll just go ahead and become a foster parent, and that way I will be fully prepared to be a respite caregiver for my friends who are foster parents. So I started there, and then I started taking the classes, and my heart just kept having that stirred feeling like, I think there's something more that God wants me to do with this journey. And so while I was doing the classes, I really started to feel like, no, I think I want to be a foster parent. And so, you fill out all this paperwork. If you haven't heard, there's like paperwork where you just explain like every single detail down to the most insignificant things about which children you would and would not take. And as I was filling out that paperwork, I went from, first I was thinking, okay, I will take only one child, only school-age children so they can go into, they'll be in school during the day while I work. But as I was filling that out, like my heart again was burdened, like no, I think I need to be more open than that. And this is my own journey, not to say that anybody else's journey is any less significant, but for me, by the end of filling out that paperwork, I think now I've got 3 beds in my house open, preferably taking just 2 children, but I do have a 3rd bed open, ages 0 to 10, so this huge window, and like a ton of different like specific unique needs and things like that I'm open to. And so like there again, I'm like taking this another little plunge forward in this world of foster care. And so I go through the classes, they're about 12 weeks long or something like that. Go through all my classes, and by the end I'm like, yeah, I think I really want to be like a foster parent. And you know, I met a couple other single foster parents in my classes from time to time, and just kind of sharing that journey with them, and so many similarities, and like seeing somebody else do it, and I'm like, no, I think I can do this. So by the time my classes were over and I filled out all my paperwork, I was a lot more like, okay, yes, like my identity as a foster parent is that I am a single foster parent really doing this. It's not just going to be respite care, not just respite care. Respite care is very important, but it's not, I'm not limiting myself to what I think I will be able to like manage and hold on to myself. It's more of like this open-handed, like, okay, God, what do you want to bring me? Where do you want me to serve? Who are the people that you want me to meet? And that's a hard place to get to. It's also a hard place to stay in, like just being continually open-handed. And so if that means right now, I haven't gotten a call for weeks, and it's like so sad to me that I don't have any kids in my home. But at the same time, I told God I would be open-handed. And if that means going weeks without a foster child, then that's what it means. And he knows perfectly well what I need and what he is preparing for me and the children and the families involved with foster care. So then along the way of kind of riding this wave, there's definitely been big bumps in the road. I may have mentioned before, I actually took about a 5 or 6 month break in foster care after my first little baby during a really difficult time in my life. And when I first kind of took my name off the list, I was sure I was never going to go back to foster care. I was like, I'm pretty sure I'm done. Like, having a baby for 6 months was the most wonderful thing in my life, and also the most heartbreaking thing to see him go. And I didn't think I'd be able to ever do that again. And I was just ready to be done. I took several months of a break, and there was a lot of things during that time that God healed me from, and a lot of grief that I processed through, a lot of people that really encouraged me a lot. And long story short, by the end of 5 or 6 months, I kind of got the wind back in my sails a little bit. I had a chance to reevaluate, why am I doing this? What is the foundation that I sit on? And not just do I want to do foster care again, but does God still have this for me? And if the answer is yes, then where am I? I'm kind of holding my hand up to God and saying, no, God, I'd rather do something different. I'd rather use my money in a different way. I'd rather use my time in a different way. I'd rather not have this obligation on my life, this responsibility. And by the end of it, obviously, I'm back at it, and I'm back taking children, and I've had 2 kids in my home since then, and I'm so glad. I'm so glad. I think for a little bit, in some ways, I needed to just get my name back on the list, just more of like an act of kind of obedience, you could say, because I was ready again. I was in a healthier place, and I got my name back on the list. And I've mentioned before how I never thought that my second, or it really is my 3rd placement, my 3rd little boy, would be another infant. I think that was just such a generous thing of God after such a heartbreak with an infant, to allow me to be a parent to an infant again. And I've mentioned before, you can watch my other video about how that was a really healing time for me. And so just to see God's generosity during a time where I felt like I was really acting out of more obedience to God than like this true, just like doing this for me kind of attitude. So it was cool to see, like, as I'm going and as I'm riding the wave, I've definitely had bumps, and I anticipate more bumps along the way. But I've also seen God's faithfulness as I ride the wave, and as I try over and over again to get my hands open to what he has for me. So that would be my encouragement for you too. And these are all the ways that I've prepared to become a single foster parent. Of course, there's some of those practical things, like I've mentioned in videos, things that you want to get and put in the room. But in terms of preparing my heart, these were the things that I thought of how I prepared my heart. So I hope this has encouraged you. I hope it has taught you something, and maybe you could take a couple of these suggestions as ways that you could prepare yourself if you're thinking about becoming a foster parent. Let me know what you think, and if you have any other suggestions or tips for people that want to become foster parents, leave them in the comments below, and we can really encourage each other. Thanks, everybody. I hope you have a great day. Bye.